if you could get your leadership to do the following exercise, it might be helpful. One is to just say, what do we mean when we mean diversity? I mean, gender, race, age, political views, socioeconomic background, sexuality, whatever it might be, like just organically discuss as a group. And then put that away for a second and then do an exercise that was incredibly personally uncomfortable for me, which is they really benignly brought up that you should write down your 10 innermost circle, the 10 people that you go to most for advice, for guidance, for counsel. And then they pull back out the diversity spectrum and they ask you to mark who is of this. And it's like, it was like liberal white people was my list. And I go, that is in fact my own circle of one, what I most influence. Who do I go to for counsel, for support, for community was in fact full of bias. And Jellyvision's not a better company yet, and I am not a better leader yet, but I have a profound sense of awareness of the bias of myself that I have to tackle. And instead of like being the voice of other people not in the room, if you can just get people to have that moment of like, oh man, my lens is jacked and I need to begin a journey of changing it, then you have to advocate less for others. And you can kind of like, it's a pretty profoundly awful exercise to look at and be like, my inner circle is Caucasian. I'm doing something wrong in the way I hire because I'm doing something wrong in the way I seek counsel. And it's like, then you say, what are your commitments to change? What are you going to do about who you follow on social media? How are you changing your lens of the content and values you consume? Like what, just little steps forward. But again, awareness is only the first step, like impact effectiveness. We're not there yet, but that was a very powerful exercise where instead of you having to be the champion, you can get people to see what they're doing and how sort of skewed their own lens of expertise can be.
I think you have to be a remixer. And by that, I mean, well, first of all, I'm an adult learner, and I've always been a learner. My mother was a teacher. All of the people in my family were teachers. I was an inveterate reader. And so I always tried to teach myself things that wouldn't easily be available to me. So in that process, I created my own journey, which allowed me to take in information that I believed helped me to understand and embrace organizations, environments that I typically wouldn't be in because I tried to, educate myself. And I think of it as, a remixer would with music, trying to, blend chords, blend beats. It really isn't that different. And I just had this conversation with someone the other day. They said, well, I want to do what you do. I want to be in D&I. And I said, well, I don't know if you really want to wear that jacket because, it's a weighted jacket. And, like some jackets are, they tend to go out of style. I said, what you really want to be, if you really want to do this, you want to be a human capital professional that has expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that will give you a little bit more runway, if you will, and still allow you to accomplish some of your professional goals. Because there's nobody here that, well, I might be the only person here that remembers when you could only change the television by getting up and walking across the room and turning the knob. And so when you think about just that simple kind of technology transition, careers are the same way. But to get from here to there, you got to be willing to look at things through different lenses.
As a straight white man working in diversity, I also get this question a lot. And it's a valid question, and it's a question that should be asked, and not just of people who look like me or anybody on stage, but of everybody, about how they're thinking about their own identity. And, it's interesting. It's been an interesting journey for me because I come from a place of privilege where I've had tremendous opportunity in my life just basically by the circumstances into which I was born. And I've enjoyed it tremendously, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that presents an opportunity to try and create some opportunity for other people. And But thinking about how to sort of like manage that and navigate that in the real world and go into meetings and go on stage and doing these other types of things is actually a challenge. And so the place that I like to start from and the place that I try and remind myself of every day is the only thing that I truly understand is that I'll never understand. And like that's my starting point. So probably 99% of the people in this room experience on a daily basis something that I've never experienced in my life. It's probably true if you think about it. Not one time has anybody, bless you, ever come up to me and been like, hey, can you make a cup of coffee for this meeting? Like it just doesn't happen. And that's an easy one. Like that's annoying, but like nobody got hurt really in the physical sense. And so the understanding that, you know, almost invariably I'll be talking to people whose personal experiences or business experiences or life experiences or their future, I'll never, as much as I try and empathize, as much as I try and put myself in their shoes, I'll never fully understand what they're going through. And that's the starting point. That's where I operate from. And that's actually become a big part of my identity, is that to trying to conduct myself in a fashion of thoughtfulness about the experience that other people are having, not in trying to figure it out, not in trying to crack the code, but in trying to just understand that everybody has these complex and beautiful and interesting and painful stories that they're dealing with. And it's not our job to try and manage them. It's our job to try and support them in whatever fashion that we possibly can. And so that's how I think about it. And I think about it constantly. And I get asked about it a lot. And I'm always glad when people ask about it. And I think that I think these conversations are necessary. Like I think this is the type of place where people will make progress in the way that they think about things. And so when you think about this idea of a reality where people treat one another better, where people are more thoughtful and friendly to one another, asking questions like that, that's part of it. That is how we will move the needle forward towards that type of environment.
I think that there are tons of resources you can use to sort of reorient hiring to not be about attributes, but instead to be about competencies. You're hiring based on personality and human characteristics, and in fact, that's not what you need. What you need are business results. I have books I can recommend afterwards, like just reorient from like, do I like you, to have you proven a track record of doing these, of leadership, of innovation, of whatever, and getting it out of likability or extroversion or other sort of characteristics. Be very mindful of the outcomes a successful leader in this role will create, and the competencies that need to be exhibited to give you confidence that they can get those outcomes. And write those before you begin any of the job description process, anything, to get people aligned, so that when you're arguing over a strategy and a document already agreed to versus a new concept when you're about to make an offer.
The piece of advice I give you are twofold. One is that, to Amanda's point, the conversation that you're having is in the moment about a specific candidate. It's not an abstract conversation that needs to happen earlier in the process. And so you, as the recruiter, part of your job, and this applies to any business challenge that falls into this category, your job is to move the conversation earlier, so that by the time that you get into that situation, it's asked and answered. Because the worst thing in the world to try and do is convince somebody that the person they just met, who they really connected with, who they think is going to slay, 5 minutes after they talk to them, is not the right candidate for them, when it fits all the things that they had in their head. Or to convince them 5 minutes before they're going to talk to somebody that, like, you should really give this person a chance because they might not look like what you're expecting, but whatever. Like, that's not the right time to have that conversation. It needs to happen earlier. The second part of it is that you need to practice some specific things, like lines, like you're a stand-up or a politician or something, that you can say in those moments to get your point across while still keeping your job and keeping like the good relationship with your people. And so that's really hard. But we talk about it a lot in terms of like microaggressions. At 1871, we had this code word or code phrase that we use, which is, I think what you just said might have been misinterpreted. Would you care to clarify that? And everybody on the team knew it. And it was like the shot across the bow that you could give somebody, that like you're wading into some territory that is not fair, and you have one moment to like rethink. And by the time that people learned it like a game, then people really understood what that meant. And so my advice would be to come up with 3 or 4 things that you can say for the common problems that you think that are like pithy, thoughtful statements that are going to get the point across in a non-confrontational but aggressive and assertive fashion, and have those in your quiver. Those are your arrows. Those are your tools so that you can go out and fight this battle. And I think if you can kind of move the conversation earlier and then equip yourself with some more weapons, you'll have a better chance. It's still a very, very difficult question, though.
But I believe that if you change who writes checks, you change who gets checks. So you change who gets to grow quickly, and you change who gets to have big outcomes. And then you change those people who are bulletproof and rich and seed the next generation of startups. So I would write $1 million checks to great seed ideas with the condition that you match them with the best mentors in each city in which capital is placed, that those mentors are committed to be a full-time equity-incented board member. Because so much of it is like not what you do on your own. It's like what you have access to in a network. So I would bring capital and the best of the best proven entrepreneurs and place them in entrepreneurs who are underrepresented in the landscape, women in this case, and give them the capital they need that usually only happens to people who have rich parents or rich uncles so that they have a chance to try to grow a business quickly.
The city's taking a look at the PLAs that we currently have with a number of organizations throughout the city. We also have, as some of you may know, we have a deputy mayor for economic and community development, Samir Mayakar, who's been having a lot of conversations with not just tech, but the entire business community about ways that they can start the journey, as I'll call it, toward having more equity. We have an Office of Equity and Racial Justice that's just launching that is going to start a conversation about race, but by tackling the very challenging subject of race, we will also tackle other aspects and areas of inequity, like what happens around the wage gap. So for me, it's a nascent effort because my primary charge was to look at how we use diversity and inclusion as a lens for city employment. The broader conversation is just really starting, in part because Mayor Lightfoot's emphasis on equity, accountability, and transparency is driving that. And I would submit that the tech companies, as they're having conversations with us now, are very receptive, but it's a new start to I think a long conversation.
The first thing I would say is get good at being a figure-it-outer. So same theme, different words, a self-adaptive learner. Some of the realities of my job, just to be like really honest, it's like a closed group, we're all friends here. 80% of my life, I'm over my skis and I don't know what I'm doing. And I was in a board meeting and they're like, you need to go raise $20 million worth of capital, but it's secondary. So it's not like, on the balance sheet. It doesn't make the mold of typical growth equity, but go figure it out. You got to go raise $20 million of secondary capital. I think one woman in Chicago had raised more than $20 million at that point. So I was like, I have no idea what to do. There's not a playbook for this. So I sat down with the Google, and there's an awful lot of stuff in the Google that tells you how to raise capital. And it's like, just become incredibly good at figuring stuff out. Don't get stymied. Go to the Google. Go to your network. Second thing is sort of thinking about just like get good at getting thumped. Resilience is critical. One of the best parts of being a CEO in such a great community-based town is lots of incredibly impressive people give me time to teach me. And I had a chance to sit down with Chris Gladwin, who sold his company for over $1 billion to IBM a couple of years ago. And he was telling this story at his Series D round. He got 105 no's in a row before he finally got access to capital that let them continue to grow, that led them to this incredible exit that changed his life and created 76 millionaires in Chicago. 105 is a lot of no's. And you got to be able to say, it's a no for you, but it's not a no for me. What's your feedback so I can adjust and learn? But you can't get thumped down. You got to be gritty and resilient. And the third thing I'd say to anybody is start being the CEO you wish you had. In any role, the way you hire, the way you treat people, the quality and standards you have for work, how you have fun, how you celebrate, how you see people, all of those things, even as an individual contributor, you can commit to a level of quality that may or may not be valued by your company, but it will make you smarter. It will make you more impactful. It will make you like your job more. So I would say don't wait until you have the title. Start reading about being a great CEO. Read The CEO Next Door. Read all the books about leadership and start being the CEO you wish you had. And it will shorten the path for you to get there.